G'day and welcome. My name is Witten and I am here with the one and only Darren Campher. It is a pleasure to have you with us here at IOL, Darren. There's a couple of things that I want to chat to you about. I'm very excited to finally get an opportunity to sit down with you. Most importantly, I want to talk about this hoodie that you're wearing. You have been appointed quite recently with the MK Party. It's probably the fastest growing party I've seen in South Africa since its launch very recently, and suddenly making such massive waves after the May elections. What exactly is your role at MK? What do you do for them? What is your job title?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I'm the head of research at MK. One of our primary functions is to provide the MPs with very valuable, relevant, critical information on what they discuss in their portfolio committees. So our MPs are spread across clusters, across different portfolio committees, and they need to be as well armed as possible. In instances, we get involved in helping them draft motions, statements, speeches, and in general research as well. Apart from that, we also get involved in other departments in the party who might need research assistance, maybe the comms department, maybe there's a campaign that they're looking to launch. We would then put together some research proposal to validate whether it's worth looking at or not in terms of what we are trying to push and promote as a party. So I have a really wonderful team with me. And
let's talk about that team. How big is that team?
The team is about, so we look after three houses essentially: National Assembly, National Council of Provinces, and then we also have Tuduzile Zuma in Pan-African Parliament as chairperson of the Southern Caucus. And so we fluctuate and we kind of pull people in and then let them back into the pool as things go. So it depends. It could be anywhere between 7 and 10 people, maybe 11, depending on the project that we're working on.
And the research is something, I recall this from one of your earlier videos that I saw on TikTok, where you were talking about, people were asking, well, what do you know about this? And you were saying something along the lines of, you just really enjoy reading stuff and digesting it and understanding. Talk me through that process. How do you go about, if I say to you, you know what, I want, national health insurance is an easy one.
Okay.
I want to raise the basic income grant by 150 Rand per person. Like, where do you start?
We would start with what it is now. We would start with what the reasons were for the limitations behind it. We would have to look at what we would want to raise it to. We would want to look at whether the amount we would want to raise the grant to would actually make a meaningful difference, or would it just be some immaterial raise? And then the amount that we would want to raise it to, how would that affect the fiscus? Would it be feasible if we would need to raise additional tax revenue? Where would that come from, where people would not be upset about it?
Tax rich!
Yeah, so as you can tell by the question, it just kind of splinters off into various different directions. And so when a question like that would come up, that's when I would start asking the team, can you look at what it was, what the objections were? Can you look at how it would affect the fiscus? Can you look at maybe somebody who's really good at tax? Can you look at where we could tax this from? Can you look at potential propositions in the past to tax, to create additional tax revenue to fund something like this? So it splinters off in various different directions, and I coordinate getting all that information together and then pulling it into a cohesive, a very easy to digest report, most importantly, because you can split out like a really, really nice academic kind of research report, but you need to package it in a way that the MP can digest it immediately and run with it and do something with it.
Because they've got to speak with conviction about this, right? And they need to know that they need the facts at their fingertips, and they need to understand also what the motivations were behind gathering that data.
Exactly. So we could just dump another academic journal in front of them, but that, as you said, might not give them that kind of conviction. So we're kind of trying to perform this balancing act between submitting a document that would stand up to academic scrutiny, but also one that an MP who has limited time on their hands can digest easily and also speak with conviction on.
Let's talk about MK Party. It's been a very interesting trajectory, a very awe-inspiring trajectory for me, for the party. Seeing this party come up and rise, obviously with an inspirational and mercurial leader like Jacob Zuma, it's easy to drum up support. But there's been a flurry of let's call them mid-season signings of late, and you are one of those signings. What is attracting people to MK?
I don't know if the people that ran the campaigns would agree that it was easy, but I'm sure that from what I know, they've done a lot of work, and from what I've seen. What attracted what did you say, mid-season?
Yeah, the mid-season signings. Because there have been some pretty big names that have joined, particularly from the progressive side of
Right.
The political spectrum.
I made a video, maybe maybe March, and I said if the objectives of nationalization of state resources, expropriation without compensation, etc., if decolonization, anti-imperialism, if people find a path of less resistance under the MK to do that than under the EFF, you can't stop people from doing that. People are going to go where they want to go, and so people who have joined the party whenever they wanted to join the party, you know what I mean? I don't think MK has the budget to assign somebody to drag us all out of bed in the morning and put us behind a computer and put us in Parliament and force us to speak, you know? So people have seen value in getting behind MK's message, and I think there's been a lot of emphasis on people who have joined MK party in their working roles, or in as staff or as parliamentarians or whatever the case is. But I think we're looking past the hundreds of thousands of people who have joined just as supporters of the party, and that we need to also look at, like, because the argument might be, you did it for money, you did it for position. Okay, cool. What about the hundreds of thousands of people who are getting no money, no position, who are simply seeing the party and saying they want to rally behind it? And as you say, those people being on the progressive side of the spectrum of politics.
You were quite a vehement supporter of the EFF. I know that you may have come in for some stick on social media for moving from EFF to MK. What would you say to that?
The EFF, for my generation, had been one of the strongest advocates and flagship parties for raising the conversation or bringing the conversation to the forefront of socialism, of nationalization of state resources, of expropriation without compensation, all those things, right? I'm not saying that other parties hadn't done that, but for my generation in particular, the EFF were the loudest about this, right? And so there was a natural affinity that I had, and many others like me, had grown into when becoming more socioeconomically aware. And you're looking at a party that is pushing for these socialist values, and there's really only one who's as loud and as big. And so when I made the video, one of the videos that went viral about trying to decide who to vote for, there were very few parties on that side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Very, very few parties. And so I had naturally found myself with an affinity to the EFF. And the EFF, to be fair, to call a spade without saying anything, because I still speak to a few people in the EFF and I consider them colleagues and some of them possibly even friends. So without trying to get them into any heat, the EFF had first dibs with me joining them because they had approached me before MK existed. Now some people might say, oh, they knew MK was going to come into existence long before. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So for me, EFF had first dibs. They could have taken me on when they were ready. They didn't do that. I had no issues with that. I was still a supporter of the party because of what they had advocated for. No issues at all. But as MK started to take prominence, it was like, yeah, and again, if you kind of cast your mind back to that whiteboard, I said that MK is economically progressive, socially a bit more conservative, which at the time for me wasn't the space I was looking at. But then as the party started to take shape, they started to say things that align more with my values. So I joined the party when I was ready to join the party based on how my values stuck with me and how I saw the party aligning with that values. I know that we often say there's not a perfect party, but there has to be that minimum level that the party needs to breach for me to consider it as an option. And and I said this in the interview with Sizwe, I said one was the conversation and how they stood up to scrutiny, which was that they took it and they internalized and they were like, okay, we get it. And second was when they had put in their constitution that they wanted to be more inclusive. They said equality in terms of racism, sexism, and all other forms of inequality and discrimination. And I was like, it's not exactly as clear as I would like it to be, but it is all-encompassing enough for them to be held accountable. And that was an important thing for me. Do you have something on paper that is written down so that you can be held accountable for that as a party? You could leave it out completely, which many parties do. Like the ACDP will tell you straight what they want. You know what I mean? And so for me, the absence wasn't good enough. I needed to have something on paper that I could say, this is what you said. And so when that was there, I was like, okay, now it becomes an option. And head of research is where we landed.
Yeah, that's a bloody good position. I mean, congratulations.
It allows me to work with a really great team. It allows me to get into a position to provide really great information to the MPs. As you can imagine, the party's still new, so I'm trying to create a lot of structure. The flow of information is not as streamlined as I would want it to be, but it's getting there very fast, which is very impressive. And so I think we're very quickly getting to the point where the kind of information we would want to get to the MPs is at the level we would want it to be. I expect to see that reflected in how they speak in Parliament and in how the policy and in how the party articulates itself in terms of policy.
Let's talk politics for a second, right? I mean, something that concerns me quite greatly. I mean, I saw this and it did worry me, and there was a question that popped into my head where I saw the falling support of the EFF. I was like, is this the death of the left, right? Is this, and it was concerning for me because what I am seeing, I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm seeing a far greater push towards right-wing nationalism globally, where, you know, Argentina, the States, there've been elections where it's the right-wingers that are the ones that are gathering more steam. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the left is becoming more vocal. So, if the Bella Bill hadn't existed to try and create more equality in terms of access to education, in terms of spatial apartheid, right? If that didn't come up, we wouldn't have seen the march that we saw with Freedom Front Plus and DA and PA and AfriForum, right? And so we also have to understand that when there's opposition to the current status quo, as much as the left pushes, the right pushes back. And so I think that we might be tempted to think that the right is becoming louder and more dominant. It's not that, they're just becoming visually as impactful as they've always been in the background because they didn't have to be. If the laws are left untouched, you don't need, you know what I mean?
You can protect your privilege quietly.
But when things like, and I'm just using this as an example, but when things like the Bella Bill get put onto the table and the status quo, there's an attempt to disrupt it, then you get actions like you do now. And so I think in some way it's a good thing because it lets you know exactly how much work there is to do. And nobody's disillusioned about where we are. And when you see people come for a march in the orange, white and blue, you know what's up. You know? And so I think that right-wing volume is from very real left-wing push, which is expected.
I do feel like, it's not reflective in national elections being conducted in other countries, but it's like the people feel like, hang on, we need to put people first. For so long we've put business first, we put business interests first, we put a certain small cabal of politicians first, and we've got to put people first. National health insurance is a big one for me, the Bella Bill is a big one. Anything that kind of looks after, like, let's look after our people and not after individuals. And it just feels like that's getting louder. And like, I like the fact that it's not just the EFF anymore saying these things. I mean, and it's what the ANC was founded on. It's not what the ANC has become. And like, I'm glad that there's another voice in that corner. Now the big question is the Progressive Caucus okay?
I think you've heard many members of the Progressive Caucus across parties say that, like, in Parliament, the Progressive Caucus is on the same page. I personally wish that we were more united publicly as much as we are in Parliament, because I do know that in Parliament, and I asked this, one of the first questions I asked, when does the Progressive Caucus meet, and is everything okay? We meet every Tuesday, everything's fine. Like when it comes to actually putting down the votes and casting it, or raising objections or supporting motions, whatever it is, in those instances in Parliament, everything's fine. I wish that was reflected in public. Unfortunately, it's not.
No, but I mean, then again, you look at the very public spats, and Helen Zille leads this charge, right? The very public cracks appearing within the GNU, and it's like, you know, yeah, that's public, we can see that, and like, okay, well, hang on these matters you guys disagree quite vehemently. So I mean, like, public disagreements, yeah, I suppose it's okay, provided the voting goes the right way in Parliament?
Yeah, you're right. I suppose it is. I guess, I think it's, we can say it's natural, but there's always been a higher standard for the left.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We've always held ourselves to higher standards, and right-wing parties have always held the left to higher standards. And I just think that's how it's going to be. And I'm okay with that. Especially because what we want is, in theory, so pure, so largely beneficial to the majority, that you immediately create this like idealistic picture of what the party is going to look like, that's going to bring you to this oasis, this nirvana. And in reality, that's unfortunately not the case. But as you say, when they're in Parliament, they vote the same, and the same for the GNU. When it comes to expropriation without compensation, you're going to see how they vote. You know what I mean? When it comes to the ballable, you're going to see the same thing. I hope we can reach the level of maturity where we can publicly be as united as we are in Parliament. I really hope we can. And if we can't, I hope that people as individuals can meet each other on course to the same direction. Because you see, if politicians want to fight, and social media influencers and content creators want to fight, I'm less interested in that and more interested in how that reflects in people on the ground. So if people on the ground are looking at that and saying, you guys are all clowns, just do your job in Parliament, I'm fine with that. But if people on the ground start taking on the characteristics of the MPs and content creators and everything who lead them, and internalize that political spats, now it's a problem, and now it's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it breeds a nasty environment for violence to
Yeah, and that's a big reason that leading up to the elections, I was speaking on political party policy, so that because that's ultimately what it is. These are the rules that this party wants for us as society. Choose the party who creates or advocates for the rules that you want for yourself. If one party changes the rules, now you have a problem. If they keep pushing for those rules, that's fine. So I hope that us as individuals, that people as individuals, can mature beyond internalizing the political spats between parties and still see each other and be like, we still want the same things they can. It's fine.
Yeah. I want to talk about this ideologies, because I think it's an important point that you touch on. A national and provincial election needs to be decided based on ideologies, right? It needs to be based on what do you stand for, how is it going to impact my life. But when it comes to next year, I'm just wanting to us to leapfrog to municipal elections coming up. That becomes about people's day-to-day and service delivery, and in the municipality that I live in, are my potholes getting fixed? Do I have running water? Do I have electricity? Is it safe for my child? Do I have to walk 200 meters to go and to use a shared ablution block, for example, in a township? How does MK's how would you rate MK's chances? I mean, obviously, you're a member of the party. How would you rate the chances for municipal elections next year? when it comes to like
Yeah.
at the coalface of delivery?
MK has been very active on the ground. As active as a party who is less than 1 year old can be. So like the standards, like if we're calling a spade, the standards are quite high. We're competing with parties who have quite a few years on us. But the one benefit that MK has, and the reason that they reach their numbers so quickly, is because they are in touch with people on the ground. I've worked with, it's been, what's the date today? Like the 27th. It's been about a month. And many of the people I've worked with in the party, across the spectrum, have a very, very real understanding of what people go through. Which, given some of the names of the people that I've worked with, might be difficult to believe based on, like where they are in society, where they come from in the previous work environment. But they do. But they do. Personally, I didn't know what I was going to find in that regard. I knew about the party's ideology, and I had many conversations with him about many things, but I knew certain things I was just going to have to experience for myself. One of them being, how in touch are the people in the party with what is happening on the ground? My answer is very, very, very in touch. Understanding the day-to-day struggle, and I imagine that on a local election level, they would push for those same principles and advocate for those people just as hard as they've done in the national and provincial elections.
Yeah. I want to talk about. You said something and you spoke so beautifully. You like completely derailed my train of thought. I wanted to speak about not just service delivery. Oh, right. You were talking about not you were talking about. Where I want to take this. You look at a party like the Democratic Alliance, right? Which, according to the public, has a great record of service delivery. Why do the public feel that? Because they've got great PR machinery, right? They've got great stories that they've got captured media who blow smoke up their butts, and it's very. They have. I mean,
they have their hand.
Yeah, there. Exactly. And I mean, it's when you look at that public perception, they will tell you this is the best run city. Cape Town is the best run city in the country. They will tell you they are the most effective party at clean governance. They will tell you all of these things, and that message gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced because they've got this fantastic PR machinery. Those same media houses have painted Jacob Zuma particularly, and would continue to paint the people that MK is attracting in a particular light. We think state capture.
Right.
How is MK going to overcome in this PR battle? Because I mean, the DA's machinery is slick, right? So how do we get the message of the progressive left out there more effectively?
The reality is, as the party, we're gonna have to do the work. We're gonna have to do the work of breaking that stereotype of clean audits, whilst there's several cases of corruption. So we have to do the work in terms of on a local municipal level, assisting people where we have the opportunity to do so, but also do the work in terms of educating the electorate on. We have to give the public the rope that they can hang us with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you have to give them such an intricate knowledge of socioeconomics and politics that they can apply it on a daily level, that even for us, they'll be able to hold us accountable. And I think when you do that, they can disseminate between false PR and whatever the case is, for DA, for ANC, for MK, for EFF, for whatever the case is, for whatever the party is, whatever the case is. And that's a big part of what I would like to do in the research department, apart from obviously assisting MPs. We're also going to start looking at doing some work next year on doing just publications that will be open to the public, that they can look at and they can read. And for sure it'll be from an MK perspective, but the information will be objective, and how people process that entirely up to them. But we need to empower them with that rope. And once you do something like that, you have the opportunity to make a generational change, because now our household understands politics on a socioeconomic level, not just the politics of this person promises X, Y, and Z. They understand ideology, they understand left and right wing spectrum, they understand all this terminology. And so when a party that you think is going to do good for you tries to cut the minimum wage or does whatever of the crazy things that the GNU has proposed, you as just an individual, irrespective of the party you support, you look at that and you're like, hey,
But that's not in my best interests.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so now even the party that you support will be held accountable because you are empowered with that information, which is a mammoth task, but we have
But
to do it.
I don't think the electorate understands the power that it has to influence and hold to account the parties that govern us.
That's intentional. That's intentional. If you teach somebody one narrative and tell them that there's nothing outside of that narrative, very easy to manage, very easy to control. Even now, if I say something like capitalism is bad, that's intentional. That's intentional. If you teach somebody one narrative and tell them that there's nothing outside of that narrative, very easy to manage, very easy to control. Even now, if I say something like capitalism is bad, somebody who's watching this video right now has gotten a spasm. Do you know what I mean? Without understanding why, without understanding how truly bad capitalism is compared to socialism. And the first thing that they'll think is Cuba, Venezuela, whatever the case is. And then they'll be like, look at this, look at what happened. And not understanding the sanctions that were involved, not understanding the geopolitical influences, not understanding not understanding the damage of capitalism.
And not understanding, well, I was going to come there.
Yeah.
The colonization was, like that's what drove capitalism.
But when
that's what capitalism drives.
But when you teach somebody one narrative in a silo, you have an opportunity for that to remain unchecked for a very, very, very long time, for generations. In our case, you know, some of the people even in this office right now, you might hear them think of communism as a bad word, without understanding the ideology behind it or what it can be, or how you could structure it. But that's the work we have to do.
Yeah.
Apart from doing the work for people, we have to empower people with understanding this is where you live.
Yeah.
This is what affects your life on a daily basis.
And this is how certain parties can improve that at a very granular level, and not just be all lofty and we believe in equality. No. Here's how I can physically impact your day to day.
I think a key indicator that, and I don't like it when you said it, but I know it's true. When you said that the electorate doesn't understand enough about how much power they have and about the socioeconomic system, I think a key indicator that they don't is that politicians are not scared.
Yeah.
If the electorate knew exactly how much of their life was affected and governed by, number one, policies, and number two, corporate businesses who benefit from those policies, CEOs and MPs would be the most fearful people in our countries. But because the electorate doesn't have that information, they can drive around and go on tours and go on holidays. They would be shitting themselves if the people actually knew, as you said, how much power they have as a collective.
Yeah. Darren, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, man, and look forward to having you again.
Thank you very much.